The News Round on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent mo.
This is News Talk.
The greatest of all time. It's a debate that I suppose will live on forever, but one name will always be on every list. Pele passed away 24 hours ago at the age of 82. 3 days of official mourning have been declared in Brazil. We'll talk to Tim Vickery this hour in Brazil about what this giant means to his home country. Also tonight we look forward to another round of the URC Interpros on New Year's Day with Alan Quinlan, and as it's our last weekday off the ball of 2022, we're going to look back on the sporting year that was with some of our favourite pieces reflecting those moments. We'll have Brian O'Driscoll on Ireland series win New Zealand, a brilliant piece with Eric Donovan and Ronan Mullen on Katie Taylor's epic win over Amanda Serrano in New York, Brian Cody stepping down after 24 years with two of his stalwarts, Eddie Brennan and Michael Fennelly, and lots more besides. Now, it's Mick McCarthy here tonight, just me, myself and I. There's a shortage of people with Christmas and illness, and thankfully there's always old reliable Richie McCormack to lean on in these times of trouble. Richie, hello and Happy New Year.
Old reliable. Early Happy New Year to you as well, Mick. Spot the two lads who couldn't sort out days off over the Christmas to pad out the week is probably what we'd say here. But yeah, like it's a strange old week. I think obviously compounded by events in Sao Paulo last night.
Yeah.
Because I think, like, I'll be honest with you, our topic of conversation last night was about to be, sure, how do you actually pronounce Cody Gakpo's surname? And then we got the tweets and Instagrams in to go, actually, no, I think there's probably something a little bit, more weighty
so this is
to
what
talk about here. So
yeah, this is what I was going to say. Like, I mean, not to pull the curtain back, but I've been talking to Ciara here, and you were sitting in this exact seat 24 hours ago.
Yeah.
And I believe we were in the 7 o'clock news when news came through about Pele. And I didn't hear it live, and I was listening to it today, and I was like, God, Richie is incredibly somber. And it's like, I mean, for now, 24 hours later, we're thinking of Pele as somebody to be celebrated and to look back on the career with gusto almost, but 24 hours ago, you had literally just heard as you came on air, and we got Gilesy back on the phone and did a great tribute.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing because you have to kind of set the right tone, and I don't like immediate celebration probably wouldn't.
Oh, sure, absolutely,
the right thing to do. But like when you consider the 82 years that he was with us and the many facets of his career, like my first encounters with Pele are probably like a lot of other people my age and our age, Mick, without wanting to drag you into this, which would have been by videotape and by film. So like I would have seen him first in action. I don't know if anybody else out there has this. I'd love a copy of it because I think the YouTube version is a bit dodgy. BBC did a video around 1990 called The Boys from Brazil, which I think was done just before the World Cup because John Motson does the voiceover and he obviously alludes to what will Brazil do in 1990. And it's like a lot of it, obviously, it's just clips of Pele being brilliant. And as somebody else pointed out last night, apart from obviously the final and his goal there and everything he contributed to Brazil winning in 70, like we won the World Cup as a child and as one of the best players in the world as a child in 1958. And also, like, some of his best moments weren't goals. Like, you think of that dummy against Uruguay when he goes round the keeper and knocks it just wide, the chance against Romania when he tries to ping it in from the halfway line and it goes again just wide. But it shows the vision and the intelligence and the gall of the man on the football field. And then the other videotape that you would have seen a lot of Pele on when you're my age is Escape to Victory, as Corporal Luis Hernandez from Trinidad and Tobago, who can do everything on a football pitch and can score famous equalisers with an overhead kick and broken ribs and escape off into the Parisian streets under the cover of a stranger's coat.
A Pele kick, as they call it in America.
Yeah. But like it's absolutely remarkable. Like his influence stretches everywhere. Like even that Pele kick that you talk about is now not. It's like it's a move in professional wrestling. There's a guy called AJ Styles who did like an overhead kick as part of his repertoire, and that became known as the Pele kick. So like he stretches into other facets of life that very few sportsmen have ever done. So in that respect, he's definitely in rarefied air.
It's a great chat with Tim. We recorded it earlier on. It's coming up in about 15 minutes or so. But one of the things we did talk about was kind of Pele's influence on how we see Brazil now as a country even, but certainly as the football team that we all look forward to seeing. And was that all down to one man? And Tim has a great response about how his career, the 20 years of since he told his father that he was going to, dry his tears and win the World Cup to 1970, that everything changed in Brazil, in football, in technology, everything. And when you think of you think of the 1970 World Cup, and that's the first colour TV World Cup. And I always, like, the story I always hear from my dad was, my grandfather, got the TV in for the 1970 World Cup. Now, I don't know if that's apocryphal or if I'm even remembering it wrong, but that's what always been in my head. And in my head, that's as much about two things. It's about the colour, Brazil representing that colour in the yellow, blue and white, and then Pele being that representation of Brazil. That is how much he meant. He was the linchpin for, in some ways, the birth of colour television when it comes to sport.
Yeah, like there's probably two key influences in, I think, the Northern Hemisphere as regards the drivers for television, like just the medium itself. One famously is the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. So it was in 1953, I think. Obviously, television had been around for a little while, but its progress had faltered because of the Second World War. But everybody suddenly wanted television to watch the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in the UK and everywhere else. And then when colour started to become a thing, and obviously we were probably among the later adopters in this country, but certainly in the UK, in Western Europe, and possibly in North America as well, one of the main key drivers for colour TV was the 1970 World Cup. And that is just like that. Those colours, the colours of the final, particularly, like the really verdant, lush Azteca turf, those yellow jerseys of Brazil, the really dark blue of Italy, like that's seared in people's minds. And those would have been some of the first colour moving images that a lot of people would have seen outside of a cinema house. So like that's just that imprint, like that will never be replicated, because it can never be replicated. Like as somebody else said, I think it was the clip that we put out on social media from the documentary maker, the one that's on Netflix. Like he did everything first, like and that is something for all our talks of GOATs and who is the best of all time. He's definitely up there, but of all those in the conversation, he's the one who got there first.
And this is exactly it. And again, we'll talk to Tim about it, but it isn't just myth as well. It's like Pele was 2 to 4 and was just an exceptional footballer. We never really got to see him in any real way, but there's plenty of evidence out there. But the way people like John Giles, who saw him for real, that you spoke to last night, talk about him, is that, it was far from just that Pele was a figurehead legend. For want of a better, I always found that David Beckham is a terrible example of this, because David Beckham was a very, very good footballer, but he wasn't as good as his celebrity.
His celebrity outsized his actual ability.
Whereas with Pele, the ability was there to go along with the fact that he was the leader of world football. So 1958,
the ability created the celebrity.
Absolutely,
that's Pele.
1958 you talked about earlier, and you talked about it a little bit last night, and it's one thing we didn't really get to with Tim for time constraints. But the fact, again, that I can't emphasise enough, the fact that a 17-year-old wasn't just the guy who came alive in the World Cup, but was even going into it as the main man in a team that went and won the World Cup for the first time. It's actually beyond comprehension, really, isn't it? Like, I know things were different back then. People had to grow up a little bit quicker and people weren't mollycoddled. But at the same time, this was a 17-year-old who scored 2 goals in a World Cup final and led his team through the tournament.
Like I hate drawing comparisons with different eras, because obviously it's really futile. But like if you go back to 2006 and look how Lionel Messi was coated in cotton wool, being brought into that World Cup in drips and drabs in Germany, you look at how, even like, he's not in the same plane, but certainly during the 90s there was talk that he was going to be one of the great players. Somebody like Raul, who wasn't brought to Euro 96 because he was viewed as being too young at 17. And obviously was there in 98 and went on to make whatever limited impression he could do in a limited Spain side. But you're talking about 17-year-olds don't make that progress at this age. And yes, they had to be adults sooner than they probably should have been in those days. But regardless, to have that level of talent whereby you're the driving factor of your country winning a World Cup and lifting itself up 8 years on from that disappointment at the Maracanã, it's just remarkable. Like, it is fairy tale stuff. And I don't think like, I don't think that should be lost. Like, he wrote his own fairy tales several times over, and should be lauded for that, because he was just an incredible footballer.
Yeah, and look, I don't know if we're learning anything new about Pele, but it's been great to relive it over the last 24 hours, I have to say, and read all about it afresh and anew again, because it's a story that should never be forgotten or overlooked. As was predictable tonight, we've gone on way too long about Pele, which is the only interesting story of time, and we've barely any time for your news round, which is brought to you with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish today. So I'm really glad you spent all day writing it, Richie, but let's get through a couple anyway quickly.
We'll mention, obviously, there's 3 days of mourning ongoing in Brazil following Pele's death, and obviously everyone in the football world is going to pay tribute starting tonight. 2 games in the Premier League, the first of which kicks off in half an hour's time at the London Stadium. West Ham will be up against Brentford there. An 8 p.m. start at Anfield, where Liverpool entertain Leicester. Liverpool side has Alisson in goal, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Joel Matip, Virgil van Dijk and Andy Robertson. Thiago, Jordan Henderson and Harvey Elliott are in midfield, and then front three of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, Mo Salah and Darwin Nunez. Jonathan Sexton, Jameson Gibson-Park are to start together for the first time this season when Leinster welcome Connacht to the RDS on Sunday. Leo Cullen has made 13 changes to his side, with only Jordan Larmour and Ryan Baird retained. Connacht will travel to Dublin without Ireland internationals Mac Hansen, Bundy Aki and Finlay Beelum, while Malachi Fekitoa is back in the Munster centre for their game with Ulster on New Year's Day. His return, one of 6 changes from their narrow defeat to Leinster. Ulster are able to recall Jacob Stockdale, Robert Balakoon, James Hume and Billy Burns for that game, and there is a 7:35 start at Murrayfield, where Edinburgh take on Glasgow Warriors tonight. And Didier Deschamps appears certain to still be in charge of France when they visit Dublin in March. He's been holding talks with the French Football Federation this week regarding an extension to his contract, which expires with the turn of the year. But FFF President Noël Le Graët told Le Parisien this evening that a new deal is close to being signed. In fact, it seems almost his signature is the only thing that's missing from that deal.
Do you know what Deschamps needs to do now, Richie? He needs to go and say, I've already won the World Cup. I need to go and reinvent this team. I'm going to put in a load of 17-year-olds for the trip to Dublin and see if I can find the next Pele.
Well, it was actually, one of them came up. There was a guy who came on from Monaco. His name escapes me the other night. Who scored 2 off the bench against Strasbourg.
No, forget him. He could actually be good.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He actually looks really, really good. So perhaps, I don't know, maybe is 16, 15 too young for an international footballer in France? I don't think so, personally. So I think it behooves Didier Deschamps, with a new horizon coming up for him, to dig into the younger talent that is available to France, particularly in those early games in the qualification campaign.
Absolutely. Look, if it doesn't work out and you've lost in Dublin, sure, you can always go back to the tried and true, you know.
Yeah, recalibrate for those games against Greece and stuff like that, so they'll be fine. Yeah,
exactly. And make sure you do beat Greece, though. That's very important for us.
Yeah.
Richie, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your Friday evening, and Happy New Year to you. We'll chat to you next week. Alan Quinlan will be coming up later this hour to talk about Munster, Ulster, the URC, and a little bit about that interesting documentary on the Ireland All Black series and Andy Farrell's part in it that was on RT last night. So we'll get to that later this hour. But up next, as we've been talking about, we're going to talk to Tim Vickery in Brazil on the great Pele.
The news round on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, in association with Movember. Effortless shave, magnificent Mo.